Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking about how I got diagnosed with bipolar II. But before I go any further, I need you guys to know, if you don't already, that I have schizoaffective disorder, which means that I experience symptoms of schizophrenia, such as delusions and hallucinations, but also symptoms of a mood disorder, which for me meets full criteria for bipolar I. Part of the reason I started this channel was to get my story out there. The long and arduous process that took me from being cyclothymic to being schizoaffective. It took me years to get the correct diagnosis, so I like telling you guys about the steps along the way. And this one, getting diagnosed with bipolar II, was a major turning point for me in realizing that my condition, while still somewhat manageable, was rapidly becoming unmanageable. And I also have a previous video where I talk about how all of this began, like what were my early signs that I was mentally ill. But you don't have to watch that video in order to see this one, so it's standalone. So one of the first things I really figured out in my psychiatric journey was that stressful life events really bring on episodes. I mean, I'm talking about moving jobs, moving away from home, graduating college, and these things can actually cause someone who was predisposed to, say, schizoaffective disorder to fully go on to develop it because of the environmental stuff. And there's like this whole argument in the scientific community, are there genes associated with schizophrenia? Do we know? We know it runs in families, but in terms of stressful life events and how they affect schizoaffectives, I will link a paper I read all about that in the description box down below. And of course you're gonna wonder, with what I just said, what event kicked off my episode that took me from being diagnosed cyclothymic to being diagnosed bipolar II. And the thing is, there's a big difference between cyclothymia and bipolar II, just like there's a difference between bipolar II and bipolar I. I actually made a chart about this. I will throw it up on the screen right here, where you can see the different kinds of mood states that each kind of disorder tends to do. So like cyclothymia has mild lows and mild highs. Bipolar II is characterized by major depressive lows and mild highs called hypomania. And then full bipolar I has those major depressive lows and then the very full and intense mania that sends you to the other side of the world, or making crazy life purchases, or making a bunch of things and not sleeping. Now that you have all the background, which has to take up a little bit of time in this video, I want to tell you the whole story. So this all started the second semester of my freshman year of college. I met this girl because we both were running from the same creepy guy in the dining hall, asked if we could sit with each other to basically get away from him, and the plan worked. And so he walked away and we were left sitting there across from each other. And so we introduced ourselves and we got along really well, and because we continued to try to get away from him, we ended up sitting together again and again and again. And she quickly became one of my closest friends, and it was wonderful. I had a great time. And so the years passed. She went to go study in the mountains first semester, so I didn't get to see her at lunch, but when we came back, it resumed again, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I was quickly realizing that I started having feelings for her. And yes, I'm queer. I'm very, very, very queer. That's not the point of this video or this channel, but for this, you know, I'm gay. And so we really got to know each other, and I could kind of tell that she was feeling the same way about me. And so one night I got really, really, really hyped up. I hyped up myself, and I confessed my feelings towards her, saying, hey, I really like you. And she came back and said that it was mutual. I absolutely freaked out. It was absolutely amazing. I was like, oh my God, she likes me back. Like, what does this mean? Do I get to have a girlfriend? Like, it was just, oh, and it was my first like gay relationship essentially. Like, this was like new territory, and it was so exciting. And I had to deal with some stuff like internalized homophobia, but it was just like, hey, this is great. And I really enjoyed it. And because I was so excited, it sent me into an episode. Hypomania for me was basically not sleeping as much. Like, I would sleep for maybe 3 hours and be totally fine the next day. That went on for several weeks. I was eating less, which is also a usual thing because I'm just not hungry. I was all over the place, juggling things, doing it all, still doing grades, still doing classes, and I mean, it was just, frankly, it was awesome. Like, I felt on top of the world. I felt like I do with all manic parts of the episodes, that it could be sustained forever and ever, even though now I know, well, I knew every time, but learn more as time goes on that what goes up must come down, but I'm not going to get to that part of the story yet. But everything was extra colorful and vibrant, and everything had this extra, like, beauty to it. It was just I don't know, hypomania and mania in general really changes how you view the world. Everything's, like, big and important, and you're very emotional, or at least I'm very emotional. I'm a very emotional person, and that's just the nature of it in my experience. And I had so much fun. We even went on a road trip, and I don't know, it was all so new for me, but it kind of sucked because then things started to not work out. Also, by that time, my hypomanic episode was starting to drop. And again, what goes up must come down. I sank into the deepest depression of my entire life. And depression for me is this cloudy fog where everything is automatically just negative and terrible. And I don't feel pleasure the same way I used to. The things that would make me happy didn't work. It was hard to get out of bed. It was hard to go to class. It was hard to live with the fact that the girl I loved was not going to be with me forever for a wide variety of reasons. And yes, that's life and that's unfair, but that was how it was. That was how it was, and I had to accept that. And when things finally did end, she broke up with me for good reason. I felt like a piece of crap. Yeah, it wasn't good. There was lots of crying. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was, if anything, it was quiet. Very, very, very quiet. I was just so depressed, and it was terrible. Like, I didn't know if I would ever get out of it. I didn't know if I would ever get my motivation back, if I would ever get my emotions back, if life would be beautiful again. Like, I didn't know. And this was new territory for me. Like, usually my depression states, they weren't so bad and they'd last like maybe a few days before I'd swing back up again. But I mean, if you recall from earlier in this story, I was hypomanic for weeks, and that's not normal either. So being depressed for weeks was definitely not normal. I wasn't doing well. I wasn't coping well. And I'm not going to go into detail about how I wasn't coping well. But yeah, I wasn't. I just wasn't. Everything was crap hit the fan, basically. And I kind of was starting to get the idea that it wasn't going to lift on its own, not without help. And so I landed myself in my psychiatrist's office, drove home from college to meet with him, and he offered me another pill. This one was Lithium. Lithium is a big treatment for bipolar disorder in general. Like, it's usually used to treat mania, but at certain other levels, doses I should say, I'll explain levels in a minute, but at certain other doses, it can be used to treat other things. So like a medium dose would be treating bipolar depression, which is where I was. A higher dose would treat mania, and a lower dose would just give you the beneficial effects of like reconstructing your neurons and other brain health stuff. And the way Lithium works is you take the dose that corresponds to a certain level of lithium in your blood, because you have to have a certain level in order to have certain effects. So someone who takes 800 milligrams and has a lithium level of like 0.7 or something is going to be potentially different from someone else who takes 800 milligrams and they might have 0.8. That kind of thing. I'm using those numbers loosely. I can't really remember exactly the range for lithium, but I think it's like 0.9 is considered high for treating mania or something like that. But again, depends on the person to get the effects. And if you don't do it right, you get too much high of a level, lithium toxicity, and that's just bad stuff. So yeah, not good. And so those little peach pills, the ones that I dumped out in a previous video in the very beginning, I had those and I started taking it, and honestly, the depression lifted pretty quickly. I feel like I got my life back. I was basically my old self again, and I didn't realize I'd kind of lost that over the last few years, but I really felt like it was a turning point for me, that yes, I'd have to take lithium for potentially a very long time, aka maybe the rest of my life, but it was a solution, and I was happy that the first pill worked. Like, I've been really lucky in the sense that every pill I've tried, for the most part, has worked. Recently, I can't say the same, but over the course of the first, like, I don't know, 8 years of my illness, maybe 7 years, like everything my doctor gave me worked for what it was supposed to. And yes, I know I'm very lucky. And this taught me that my condition was getting worse. I had honestly thought from the very beginning, when I was diagnosed with little old cyclothymia, that if I took all my meds and went to therapy and didn't go off anything and made sure to keep a track on my mental health, like keep it going good and doing everything right, that it wouldn't progress, that it wouldn't get bad. And the fact that I was diagnosed with bipolar II was proof that it didn't matter what I did, it was getting worse. And as you guys know from my videos, it got a lot worse because it just ended badly before it got better. And I'll make another video about that. And that was my reality, that then on, when I had an episode, it was gonna be bad. Like, I mean, living with that, like trying my best, knowing it will happen again and it will be bad and I'll have to pick myself up and reconstruct the life that I so commonly destroy when I'm in episodes. Like, honestly, I feel like when I'm in episodes, everything I touch, I destroy, whether it's relationships, living situations, my physical health. I just feel like I destroy it all, and that kind of sucks. So, yeah. Didn't mean to get too deep there, but I'm gonna leave it in. But from that point on, my brain started saying things about, like, would I ever get to go to medical school? I wanted to be a doctor more than anything. Would I ever be able to live on my own? Would I be able to hold a stable job? Would I be able to be independent? Like, those thoughts were starting to enter my head. Am I seriously so mentally ill that I can't function like a normal person in society? And it's a really scary place to be when you're self-aware of your own state going downhill, even when you're doing everything right. And yeah, it's hard. And it only gets harder because, like schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder is something that can only be treated and never cured. So once you got it for life, which is why I'm stuck with schizoaffective disorder for the rest of my life. But it's not all terrible stuff. I know this was kind of doom and gloom, talking about like how depressed I was, how my relationship didn't work out. This isn't something about how terrible episodes are. This is also, I want to make a point that with therapy and with proper medications, conditions can be controlled. Like, yes, mine gets worse, but it's also been very well managed, and that's how, to this day now, I can live on my own. I can cook for myself, I can pay my bills, I can hold a full-time job, and that's all because of therapy and medication. So as much as my condition has gotten worse over the years, it has also gotten more, I don't know, like treatments that have helped it, because if I didn't have meds and I didn't have therapy, I would not be able to do what I'm doing. So I hope from this video you learned something, maybe a new perspective, maybe a new fun fact. I hope you take something from it with you and remember that people with conditions like this are people too. That's the big thing. Like, there's people like me all over the place. Like, seriously, 1 in like 100 people has bipolar disorder, or 1 in 100 people have schizophrenia. And yeah, schizoaffective disorder is lower, but I am rambling. I hope you guys have a great day. Stay tuned for my next video, and I love you very, very, very much.